Hey folks, today I'm going to be reading from the McIlvaney Intelligence Advisor. Uh, this issue, this month's issue, Economic Reality. Has the Great American Decline passed the point of no return? Introduction. They long believed that America, along with the Great American Empire, is in severe decline in every way in which a nation or empire can be in decline: economic, financial, political, social, moral, cultural, and spiritual. In our opinion, this is the result of over 50 years of European style socialism being imposed on the unsuspecting American people by a powerful global socialist elite who are hell-bent on merging America into a super-socialist New World Order, one world government. The present U.S. global financial crisis, including the sovereign debt meltdown in Europe, the deliberate destruction of the U.S. dollar via the printing of over $3.3 trillion over the past 36 months, the massive manipulation of all financial markets by the U.S. Treasury, the Fed, Wall Street, and their British and European counterparts, replete with the most gargantuan corruption from the top down in American history, is setting stage for the collapse of Rome type convulsions over the next 12 to 36 months. Are you ready for the upheaval? Most Americans are not. Where have all the jobs gone? Have you wondered why your unemployment in America, official 10% or real world 22%, according to shadow government statistics, refuses to go away or get better in spite of all the government, Fed, Wall Street propaganda and disinformation, and a recovery in progress and trillions of dollars in bailout and stimulus funds? This writer recently conducted a very sobering experiment at 3 large stores in Boise, Idaho: Costco, Target, and Fred Meyer, on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. The editor and 3 of his grandchildren looked at 150 manufactured items on the shelves of Costco and a lesser number at the other 2 stores. Items that included every tool, gadget, appliance, computer, electronic device, household item, Christmas decorations, clothing, shoes, mirrors, brushes, in short, everything from A to Z. 97% were made in China and about 3% in Vietnam, Thailand, Korea, India, Mexico, Costa Rica, etc. The writer found nothing made in America except 1 set of tires. Prior to this exercise, the editor would have guesstimated 85 to 90% of the goods from China, Asia, or other third world countries, and maybe 10 to 15% made in America. Wrong. After pondering the obvious fact that China now produces every product made and used by the whole world, that China has the manufacturing capacity to single-handedly supply the world with virtually everything except food and prescription over-the-counter drugs, and they're therefore piling up financial resources in spite of a depression in the West at an enormous rate. An even more sobering conclusion came to mind. These products used to be produced in America in tens of thousands of U.S. factories, employing tens of millions of Americans. Now those factories have been shuttered, or they've been moved by the thousands to China, where American companies pay wages of $1 an hour or less, with no benefits, no unions, no profit strangling, environmental regulations, and low taxes, versus $20 to $30 an hour in the U.S., with unions, with huge benefits, with an explosion of anti-business, environmental, and other government regulations, and with rapidly rising taxes. Tens of millions of manufacturing jobs will never return to the U.S. Most of those factories no longer exist, at least not on U.S. soil. And over the past 20 to 30 years, our global socialist planners, the Kissingers, Rockefellers, Bushes, CFR, Trilateral Commission types, told us not to worry. America had risen above manufacturing. We would now be a service and high technology economy. So manufacturing has sunk to 11% of the U.S. economy and is still dropping. The UK is also 11%, while Germany is 25%. China's economy is probably based 98% on manufacturing. And the reality is that millions of U.S. service and high-tech jobs have also moved to Asia. The Convergence Strategy, how the global socialists took America down and raised China to superpower status. Editor's note: in order to really understand where we are today and how we got here, it is important to understand that the global socialist planners have been implementing a long-term strategy to bring down America and raise up China to superpower status. There is a long-term plan or strategy, just as Curtis Bowers demonstrated in his excellent film documentary Agenda, Grinding America Down, wherein the political left in America has had a 50 to 60 year strategy for bringing America down morally, culturally, and politically. The globalists' strategy for over 40 years has been to bring America down financially and economically prior to merging us into a one world order. In the 1970s and 80s, Henry Kissinger, David Rockefeller, George H.W. Bush, and their government CFR Trilateral Commission associates talked about a concept called convergence. Those advocates of world government, Bush and Gorbachev referred to it hundreds of times as the New World Order, believed that there were 5 major power centers in the world: America, Europe, China, the Soviet Union, and the Middle East. In order to ultimately merge these regions or nations into a one-world government by and for the global socialist elite, they had to be more or less equal. Europe would be merged into one giant economic political currency bloc, the European Union. America, Canada, and Mexico would be merged into a North American Union. The People's Republic of China would have to be raised to approximate equivalency to America. And then these 5 regions were more or less equal. In the midst of some huge global crisis, probably financial, they would all be converged into one giant world government. They may or may not have anticipated the breakup of the Soviet Union, but probably not. The Middle East was included because of its vast oil wealth. The rapid rise of Islam since 1979 may or may not have been part of the strategy to weaken the West and strengthen the Middle East, but probably was. But there was one problem with their convergence theory or strategy. There was one superpower that vastly outweighed the rest economically, financially, and militarily: America. While China was still a huge but very weak third world country. To make this convergence strategy a fait accompli, they had to bring America down to the level of the other power centers and raise China up to approximate equivalency with America. This would take 30 to 40 years. It is important to understand how they raised China from third world basket case status in the 1970s to emerging superpower status today. and simultaneously took America down to its present state of economic financial decline. It was organized and facilitated by the globalist elite in America and to a lesser extent Europe. First Nixon, Kissinger, Rockefeller, Bush, et al. Went all to China in the 1970s and began to open its doors for diplomatic recognition, cultural exchange, remember the so-called ping-pong diplomacy, trade, and over time the U.S. financing of the industrialization of China. In the 1970s, before the great U.S. buildup of China, the PRC's manufacturing base was virtually non-existent. Major U.S. multinational banks and manufacturers were drawn into the PRC with visions of billions and billions in profit waiting for them in China. Of course, the real profits would accrue to the establishment elite who were orchestrating this rise of China. The American people were persuaded by the establishment elite and their wholly owned media that 1. China was too big to ignore any longer, and 2. We needed to put America and the first world on a level playing field with China and the third world. The American people were brainwashed with non-stop pro-China establishment propaganda on these 2 points, commencing during the Nixon administration and over the next decade or two. But some of us, the editor included, protested that 1. China was an evil communist regime that had butchered 60 to 70 million of its own people under Chairman Mao, and 2. We could never be on a level playing field, i.e. compete as equals, when China's wage structure was then 25 to 50 cents an hour with no benefits, and ours was then $15 to $20 an hour with benefits and unions. We said that American would ultimately not be able to compete on such a basis, would ultimately see our manufacturers go broke or move to China, and that America would ultimately be massively weakened versus China. All of this has now happened, but not by some accident of history. It all happened according to the establishment's elite convergence strategy, which commenced in the 1970s and was always designed to bring America down and raise China up to approximate equivalency with America, hence the Chinese miracle we see today, in this writer's strong opinion. Once accomplished, and that is today a reality, in the midst of some global crisis, the 5 global power centers would be merged into one gigantic global government. In 1994, David Rockefeller said while addressing the United Nations General Assembly, "All the world needs is the right major crisis, and the nations of the world will embrace the New World Order. Behold, the emerging global financial crisis. Watch for growing discussions by global elites in the coming months of the need for a global, one-world currency to help solve the financial crisis, which, incidentally, they help to precipitate. Was this financial crisis planned and orchestrated for just such a purpose? Maybe." And final editor's note, Henry Kissinger was reported to have said at the height of the Vietnam peace negotiations, surrender, in 1975 regarding South Vietnam, "Push her, but make it look as though she fell on her own." The globalist establishment has applied that same strategy to its orchestrated decline of America. Push her, but make it look like she fell on her own. We'll call it quits on this tape. I'll continue on with the deindustrialization of America and a few questions to ponder. Until then, peace. Think about it.